Hey everybody, it's Mr. Hauser. Thanks for joining me. Today I'm going to introduce you to the next artist that we're going to look at this week. So this week we're not only going to look at the art of the artist. Art of the artist? Does that sound right? I think that is, right? Okay, so not only the art of the artist, but also the life of the artist. Because some artists, their importance goes well beyond the pieces of art that they create. And in this case, that's very true, because this is an artist that has had a bigger impact than just making beautiful pieces of work or beautiful artwork. And so it is my pleasure, because she's one of my favorite artists, to introduce you to Frida Kahlo. And so I'm going to share with you a book that gives a good sense of who Frida Kahlo is. And there's what we will do when we have our artists workshop is to actually create another self-portrait, a portrait of ourselves, but in the style of Frida Kahlo. Okay, so we have to learn more about the style of Frida Kahlo and kind of what sets her apart from other artists. All right, so in order to understand Frida Kahlo, now Frida Kahlo lived about 100 years ago, and she's no longer alive. Or is she? Frida, are you alive? No. That's just a stuffy. But this is Frida Kahlo, a stuffy at least. She'll help us learn a little bit more about her this week. If you could imagine being stuck at home and wishing you could go other places, wishing you could go see other people, but not being able to. Well, that was the case for wait a minute. That was the case for Frida Kahlo. Well, that sounds a lot like the situation we're in right now. And while the circumstances, the reasons for that are very different, what Frida Kahlo did was she created her art as a way of letting her imagination go to other places, because she couldn't take her body to other places. And for us, in this situation, you know, think about that, because you're probably stuck at home a lot more than you normally would be. You're not able to go to school. You're not able to see all your friends or family, and things are a lot different. Well, that's kind of how they were for Frida Kahlo as well when she was growing up. And so what she did was created art in order to let her still travel to other places, but through her imagination. Okay, so I'll share with you the story, the book that is called Portrait of an Artist, Frida Kahlo, and it is written by Lucy Brownridge and illustrated by Sandra Diekman. All right, it's got some beautiful work in here that really shows Frida Kahlo's work. Because we'll be doing our own self-portraits in her style, I want you to really try and pay attention to the artwork as well as the story behind it, so that you can kind of see where your self-portrait's going to go this week. All right, so Frida Kahlo. Okay. Magdalena Carmen Frida Kahlo y Calderón, or Frida to her friends, was an artist. She lived in sunny Mexico. Unlike most artists whose work you might see in a gallery, Frida didn't go to art school. Instead, she taught herself. At this time, it was thought that only men could become serious artists. Frida thought that was silly, so she didn't let it worry her. While alone at home, she dreamed of fantastical scenes and turned them into magical paintings. Frida liked to paint lots of outfits or versions of herself in the same picture. She did this to show what it was like to feel like lots of different people all rolled into one body. Sometimes she felt like she was a little child, and sometimes she felt like a grown-up. When Frida was a child, she had an illness called polio, and then she had a terrible bus accident. This meant lots of time recovering in bed, which was very boring. To cheer her up, her father made her a special easel. An easel's something that could hold a painting. It meant she could paint while lying down. Frida had lots of illnesses in her life, and so she became used to painting this way. And I'll show you actual photographs of her later on. Sometimes Frida felt on top of the world. When she felt like this, her paintings would be filled with sunny colors and Mexican plants from her garden. Sometimes Frida felt low and frustrated that one of her legs was always more tired than the other. When she felt like this, her pictures were filled with gloomy colors. And polio is a disease or an illness that affects people's legs and makes her unable to walk. And so her legs did not grow the same because of the polio. Sometimes she felt happy and sad at the same time. When she felt like this, her paintings were filled with all sorts of colors. And so the paintings she created matched her feelings. At this time, the most famous artists in Mexico were mural painters who painted straight onto walls. The most famous of them all was Diego Rivera. One day, Diego was painting near where Frida lived. She took one of her paintings to show him. As soon as he saw it, he could tell that Frida was a brilliant artist. The pair became very close and inspired each other. In his work, Diego tried to show a world where everyone was equal. Frida wanted to put the same message into her paintings too. When they weren't painting, they campaigned for people of all races and abilities to be respected equally, and for poor people to be paid fairly. These are examples of how the artist goes beyond just the art and actually creates change in the world, or helps create change. Even though Diego was older than Frida and she called him her ugly frog toad, they fell in love. In the middle of summer, Frida and Diego were married in the town hall of Coyoacán, Mexico. At this time, young married women in Mexico were expected to become mothers and full-time housewives. Frida already knew that she couldn't have children, and she didn't let married life get in the way of her first love, which was painting. Frida was fond of Mexican tradition, but at times it could feel as stuffy as a stiff, frilly dress, and not very her at all. So she kind of working in traditional Mexican traditions along with just who she felt like she really was. Although her paintings had parts that were realistic, people often said they looked like they were scenes from dreams or nightmares. This annoyed Frida, who would say, "I never paint dreams. I paint my own reality." That means like her real life. Often her work is called symbolism because it is filled with symbols or objects that have meanings. Sometimes her work is called magic realism because it shows objects from real life but with a big sprinkle of Frida's special magic. Frida went to the United States with Diego because he had been asked to paint a new artwork. Frida loved meeting other glamorous artists who admired and encouraged her art, but she dearly missed Mexico. Three years later, and still in the United States, Diego was enjoying success in New York and was painting lots of big murals. However, Frida missed Mexico more and more. She felt as though her body was in the United States, but her imagination was in Mexico. So she decided to go back. Frida was so happy to be back in Mexico that she painted more than ever before. She was starting to become well known, and she managed to do something that no one from her country had ever done before. She was given her very own exhibition in New York City. An exhibition is where an artist brings a lot of their work and puts it on display for people to come view. And so on the walls were her different pieces of artwork. In Mexico, Frida made friends with a French poet named André Breton. He loved Frida's unusual painting of a bath and asked her to show her work to people in Paris. This was the first time her art had been seen so far away from Mexico. The Louvre Museum in Paris bought a painting by Frida. She became the first Mexican artist in this gallery. And the Louvre Museum is a very famous museum in Paris. that houses lots of other very important pieces of artwork. When Frida came back from Paris, Diego also came back to Mexico, and the pair lived in the blue house surrounded by lots of unusual animals. Many of Frida's animals can be spotted in her paintings. When Frida died, she was still a young woman, but in her short life she overcame many obstacles. She taught herself how to paint, and she became a famous woman artist in what seemed like a man's world. Although her paintings touch people all over the world, Frida's heart will always be rooted in her beloved Mexico. You can still visit her bright blue house and see where she painted her masterpieces. Except now it is a museum, the Frida Kahlo Museum. And so these are some of her masterpieces. And so as we create our own Frida Kahlo style, we're going to consider these paintings as well. All right. So what I would like to do is share a few real photographs of her, because I think while the illustrations in that book are beautiful and really give us a good sense, it's also important for us to see the real Frida Kahlo, because it's often, I think as soon as I saw a Barbie version of Frida Kahlo, which that exists, I think it's easy for us to sort of change our imagination of what Frida Kahlo really looks like. So it's important for us to see actual photographs, and while they were in black and white, there are plenty of real photographs of Frida Kahlo. There she is. And so with this book, here we have a very famous painting, or one of many that show her with Diego Rivera, who is also another very famous Mexican painter who did murals, the paintings on the walls. Let's see. We have a great photograph of her actually in her bed painting. And so being sick and being injured meant that she was not able to get out of bed for a lot of her life, really. And so she did have a lot of her paintings there. So even if we're not stuck in a bed, we are often stuck in our house. And so we can still let our imagination take us to places that we're not able to go to right now. Here we see a real-life photograph of Frida and Diego Rivera, and you can see how small she is and how big he is. But they're two very influential painters. Let's see, another photograph I saw, which I really liked. Here's one that shows that she had actually a cast that covered a lot of her torso, the back and front of her body, which was there because of her sickness and injuries. And so it helped support her, just like you would wear a cast if you had a broken arm. If you had, a broken back, you would wear a cast as well. And in fact, what she did, and you can kind of see this, she painted directly onto the cast, which just showed that she was able to, paint as much as she could. Here she is in bed as well, doing a little puppet show. When you're stuck in bed, when you have no place to go, and this was at a time when TV and the internet weren't really weren't really around. Certainly the internet was not around, and so all those devices didn't work, but TV was very unpopular too. It was not what it is right now. So, what do? You put on puppet shows yourself and create your own storylines. So this is an interesting photo. So it looks, you can see people all around her. Because she had these exhibitions where she showed off her work, sometimes she was not able to make it herself. And for one of the exhibitions, she actually had a bed put in the middle of the museum, in the middle of the exhibition. And so she was in the bed while others were walking around and looking at her work. And that big exhibition or party went on just around her bed. And so she was very committed to that. You can see, that she has, and is known for having very, wearing traditional Mexican clothing, the flowers in her hair, the beautiful jewelry. Those are all examples that show who she is. One of the distinct things that I think draw people in terms of her look, and we'll talk more about this when we do our artist workshop, is her eyebrow. And I don't say eyebrows because it's what we would maybe call a unibrow, where it's connected here too, so it kind of goes straight across. For sports fans, I know there's a basketball player, Anthony Davis, for the Lakers, who also has sort of a unibrow, and just like him, she embraced it and really, it was part of who she was, and she owned it, and it was, her way of being who she was, and has, really made it into a beautiful thing. And so you can see on the doll that is certainly an important part of the doll as well. And so that is really just, accept who you are, and the way you grow and the way you are is who you are. And so, that is certainly something we can see from Frida. But I think what the book mentions a lot is that she lived at a time when men were really expected to do certain things and women were expected to do certain things. And she broke those ideas and showed people that, women can do the things that men typically were doing, and that not all women have to do the things that people expected women to do at that time. And so that's when we think of, how did she make the world a better place and change the world, is that she sort of fought against some of these traditions that really didn't have a great place, because they were limiting people and assigning people roles or jobs to do based on just, what gender they were born. And so Frida Kahlo was a very big, an important figure in the world in terms of, changing some of those people's feelings about that, and seeing how, it wasn't just she was the first Mexican painter here or the first Mexican woman painter here. It was really just, she was a trailblazer, which means she was the first for many things, whether it was man or woman, Mexican or not. And so she really helped, had a very big impact on the rest of the world. There's another book that I'm not going to share right now because I think, or rather I am. However, what you can do is you can just go boop and stop it if you've had enough Frida Kahlo for now. If you would like to read another story, I'm going to continue this, but I don't expect you to just sit for a half hour, okay? If you want to get up, stretch, have a snack, that's absolutely fine. Do what you can. But I'm going to share another book just because I love Frida Kahlo that much. And for those of you who really want to learn more about her, I'm going to share another book. And it's called Frida Kahlo and Her Animalitos. Animalitos are little animals in Spanish. And so it was mentioned in the other book that those animals often showed up in her painting. This will give us a little bit of the same information, but also some new information. And this one is by Monica Brown and illustrated by John Parra. Frida Kahlo and Her Animalitos. This is the story of a little girl named Frida who grew up to be one of the most famous painters of all time. Frida was special. This is also the story of 2 monkeys, a parrot, 3 dogs, 2 turkeys, an eagle, a black cat, and a fawn. They were Frida's pets, and they were special too. A fawn is like a baby deer. Frida had a parrot named Bonito. Bonito means pretty or beautiful in Spanish. Like her parrot, Frida was colorful. She liked to wear bold shades that celebrated indigenous Mexico and her own heritage. She lived in a house the color of a parrot's bright blue feather, La Casa Azul, or the blue house, where she grew up with her mom, dad, and sisters. You can see, I'm not sure if this book shares this, but her dad was a photographer. And so he was an artist as well that created images. This is an old-time camera. It's not on a phone like it might be these days, but so he used his art through his camera. And she actually also worked with him and would paint on top of those photographs. Frida had a pet fawn named Granizo. Like her fawn, Frida had watchful, beautiful eyes. When Frida closed her eyes, she remembered her life as a little girl. Frida was always with her father, a photographer who taught her to look at the world through curious eyes. Frida and her father would walk to the park to collect bugs to look at under a microscope. Frida's father also taught her how to paint finishing touches on his photographs. Frida loved the small brushes and the beautiful colors. And there you go, Mr. Hauser, way to repeat what's in the book. All right, Frida had a cat with black shiny fur, the same color as her long dark hair. Like a cat, Frida was playful, but as a child, Frida couldn't always play. When Frida was 6, she got very sick. She was in bed for a long time, but little Frida didn't get sad or bored. Instead, she used her breath to make mist on her window, and then she drew a door with her finger. Frida used her big imagination and curious eyes to walk out the door with a magic friend, a little girl who danced and played like a kitten. Frida was independent like a cat. Frida's sickness left one of her legs different from the other, and the children made fun of her. But this didn't stop Frida from skating and riding bikes and rowing on the lakes of Chapultepec Park so that her leg could get stronger. Frida was not afraid to do things other little girls didn't usually do. She wore overalls and boxed and wrestled. There are actually several people that we will learn about this year who were sick as children and who had to do extra in order to keep their bodies and themselves healthy. And by doing that, they were actually able to stay healthy or to, stay active and to do lots of other things that people maybe didn't think that they were able to do. Frida had 2 spider monkeys, Fulang Chang and Caimito de Garibal. Like her monkeys, Frida could be mischievous, that means up to no good or sneaky, even when she was a teenager. When Frida was 15, she went to school called La Preparatoria and found a group of friends she loved. Like Frida, her friends were curious to learn all they could. Together they read and studied and argued and sometimes got into trouble. Wearing matching caps, they rode donkeys through halls of the Preparatoria and set off firecrackers. Trouble, trouble. Frida had an eagle named Gertrudis. Like her eagle, Frida's imagination could fly high. When Frida was 18, she was in a terrible accident, and once again she had to be in bed for many months. This time, Frida didn't create a magic friend. She created art. Frida's mother made her a special easel and hung a mirror over her canopy bed so Frida could paint. Frida used her imagination and curious eyes to do just that. Feet, what do I need you for when I have wings to fly? And if those weren't enough pets, Frida had 2 turkeys and 3 dogs. Señor Solot, Señorita Capolina, and Señorita Costi. Frida's turkeys were intelligent and sensitive, just like herself. And, like Frida, her dogs were warm and loving. When she was lonely or sad, she would wrap her arms around them and they would comfort her. Her solo dogs were the same breed that ran and hunted with the Aztecs thousands of years ago, and a reflection of Frida's heritage, of which she was very proud. Frida's dogs had no hair, but their bodies were warm, and Frida gave them great big hugs whenever she felt lonely or sad. Frida's Animalitos were spirited and entertaining, just like Frida. When her 2 spider monkeys were being good, Frida would hold them like babies. When they were being mischievous, they would steal socks and fruits and leap through windows so no one could catch them. Her parrot, named Bonito, liked to snuggle under the covers while Frida took naps and would do tricks at the dinner table for pats of butter. Frida's Animalitos played all day in the courtyard at La Casa Azul, the bright blue house on Londres Street. Her husband, Diego Rivera, even made the animals a pyramid to climb on so that her pets could roam freely. When Frida painted, her pets would keep her company, and Frida painted all the time, while the birds sang, the dogs barked, and the turkeys danced in the garden. Frida's animals were her children, her friends, and her inspiration. Frida painted when she was sick and hurting, and Frida painted when she was happy. She also painted when Diego was gone and she was sad. But Frida was never really alone at La Casa Azul, the bright blue house on Londres Street. She had her Animalitos and herself, and she painted both. Frida painted herself with Fulang Chang, playing with ribbons. She painted herself with Bonito the parrot and Senor Solol and the dog. She painted her black cat too, peeking over her shoulder. Frida painted herself with all the pets she loved so much, and even butterflies and caterpillars. Her paintings were magic. And today, if you visit La Casa Azul in Coyoacán, just outside of Mexico City, you might hear the sound of a bird or see a black cat jump from the pyramid that sits in the courtyard of the bright blue house on Londres Street, where Frida and her Animalitos lived so long ago. And here we have an actual photo of Frida Kahlo with what looks like one of her spider monkeys. Now, I don't encourage getting monkeys or turkeys in your house or fawns, but if you do have a pet, feel free to have your pet close by when you're doing your Frida Kahlo work this week. That explains the monkey on her shoulder. Nice. Thank you. Okay. So I hope you enjoyed that. If you did stick to both books, great. If you didn't, no worries. You won't even see this, so it doesn't matter. I'm not talking to you, I guess. But hopefully you'll have fun as we create our own self-portraits in the style of Frida Kahlo. All right. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you soon. Bye.